Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies. Oh, very good. I see what you did there. We talk about horror movies, and on this episode in particular, we are going to be talking about Day of the Dead. We are going to round out the Dead trilogy, George A. Romero's masterclass in zombie making. In fact, it's basically the origin of the modern zombie. Of course, we started doing this because he passed away a few weeks ago. We did Night, we did Dawn, so we are going to talk about Day, which is going to be interesting because it is definitely the sort of the Red Herring's stepchild of the trilogy. Certainly, it's the one that typically don't like as much. It's the one that certainly wasn't like very much at all, I think, at the time, and then over the years there's been some appreciation for it, but it's often seen as the weaker one. So we're going to get into it. I'll just give you a flat spoiler warning right now, just so we can talk freely without worrying about it. Obviously, for a lot of movies, we do a spoiler-free section. I don't think it's as worthwhile for a movie like this. So, Day of the Dead, the concluding chapter of a trilogy which shares, at least to my knowledge, not a single character between the three films. Like, there's no one from anyone that pops up in another one, nothing like that. Mainly because
I don't believe so.
Mainly because they couldn't, they didn't have the rights because they were doing it with a different company. So it was like, so I don't think they could never call it Dawn of the Dead 2. Not that they would, I don't think. Given that they had Night and Dawn, I doubt they would want to call it anything else. But
so that's why I'll never have a nice, juicy, fancy Blu-ray box set.
No.
Damn it.
That is exactly why. Yes. There has been trilogy box sets in the past in certain countries, just depending if they can wrangle the rights together. But as we mentioned on the Dawn review, Dawn's the license holders making it difficult to put out any releases of that. So right now we're in a bit of a weird space with it. But Day of the Dead is actually quite plentiful. You can get that quite easily. Tons of releases of Day of the Dead. I actually have 2 separate Blu-rays of Day of the Dead. That's how easy it is to get a hold of. I have the original Anchor Bay Blu-ray. I have the Scream Factory Blu-ray. And both of them, they are side by side. It's funny that the weakest of the trilogy is the one that I've got 2 releases of, but whatever. I'm not going to complain. So what is Day of the Dead? Obviously, the first one, very simple. It's in a house, try to survive. Second one, group of characters get to a shopping mall, and they sort of live in that and sort of make that sort of their life for a while, but eventually things obviously go awry. So what is the third one? Like, can you sum it up in as simple a way? Not as simple. It's definitely not super complex either, but basically we're further down the timeline in the zombie apocalypse. It makes it very clear at the start that it's been going on for a while. There's even less people around now. The zombies that are around are way more decayed than we've seen them in the previous films. And
I love that. I think they look really good in this, and I like if you do kind of look at it as occurring all in the same universe. I like that there's a little bit of a progression to it, that they the further along it goes, the worse they look.
Most of the film takes place in, again, a sort of central location, and in this case it's a underground bunker that the military have got with some science labs, and it's the last remaining people. There's a couple of scientists who are working on something to do with the apocalypse, and the military who are supposed to be there to protect them. But we get the sense quite quickly that they've been there for a long time now. They're starting to lose hope, and it's starting to break down. Like, the relationship is starting to get untrustworthy. The military in particular are getting very kind of rowdy and
very testy.
Very testy, very, very short-tempered, and I mean, honestly, very sexist. There's a lot, like, I think one of the big themes of this movie is there's one female character, and the military characters all basically look at her like a piece of meat and treat her accordingly. And
I think it's especially timely now, just how, like, you could make a point of it kind of being about like toxic masculinity, because just like all the guys are just very aggro, and like you said, like they're really fly off the handle real quick with like the lady, and they just seem like they're acting like very macho manly men.
They're constantly doing that. Like, I think the first 2 soldiers we meet, within about a minute, they're talking about how big their dicks are. Like, that is literally where the conversation goes. Whenever, like, the I keep calling her the woman, Sarah, our main character, she's concerned that one of the soldiers is like overstressed and overworked and not getting any sleep, and because she's so concerned, all of the other soldiers basically just start constantly making jokes that she's having sex with them, because that's the only reason she'd care about them, is that they're having sex. So again, a very immature kind of like mindset that some of these soldiers are. You brought up a sort of interesting sort of angle on it there with the whole toxic masculinity, and I think that's a part of it, but I think maybe obviously the biggest thing here is the idea of the mistrust of the military.
Oh yeah.
And maybe mistrust of government as well as a sort of whole. I think that's maybe. I don't think the social commentary is as strong in this one as it is the other two. But there is some stuff there to glean. I think the theme that carries out across all three films is the idea that it's people who are the problem, and it's the people who turn on each other. It's the military characters who eventually cause all this to crumble, because they don't trust the other characters. They try and take command. They want to feel powerful, and it all kind of comes crumbling down because they can't work together. It's the idea that you have this microcosm, this mini society with just about a dozen people, and yet it still ends up with the same problems that the entire country has when there's like millions and millions of people. So it's again the idea. It's an examination of human behavior more than anything else. But so that's the sort of the main themes of the film. But yeah, so it takes place in this bunker. The main scientist is trying to experiment on the zombies, try to see if he can teach them to not eat them, basically. And but you have all this tension going on, and of course eventually things go wrong and the zombies get in.
I think it's interesting to see. I feel like Romero was very obsessed with the idea of like zombies being able to evolve and learn. I feel like we see a little bit with Dawn of the Dead, where it kind of mentions like them almost having this muscle memory, and then here I feel like he kind of takes it to the next degree, where is showing them that like you can teach them, they can learn, they're not these brainless like beasts that don't know or can't do anything. And then and I think it's something he explores like in his later works too, but I think it's a pretty interesting concept.
Well, I think obviously we talked a lot in the first two about what the zombies represented and like what the metaphor was, that they were kind of to use another metaphor, the sheep that just kind of go along with what society expects them to do, and that's kind of the metaphor. And I think what's interesting here is that you have this main zombie, Bob, who turns out might have been in the military because he seems to know how to use a gun. Like he sort of instinctively just knows how to hold a gun and he tries to fire it. And at the end of the movie, when he sees that his scientist, who he's apparently grown attached to, because the music that plays is quite sad as he sees the dead body, because Rhodes, the lead military guy, he's gunned him down when things went nuts, and Bob actually kind of like shoots him and chases him down and shoots him multiple times, and then obviously the classic salute moment that Tim was kind of emulating at the start of the show, and I think the sort of the metaphor there is that eventually, like the public, the population, even if it takes a silly long time, eventually they'll notice who their aggressor is, and eventually he noticed that he was the bad guy, even though he like before that, he would have eaten any of them, but like just the idea that like the public are so ignorant as to what's going on, they don't really think about it, they don't really see what the problem is, and maybe till it's too late. And it is too late because people start dying. Like all the characters are kind of screwed by this point. But he learns enough and realizes enough to know that he's the bad guy and he should take him out. And I wonder if that's what that was maybe saying, is that eventually the sheep do kind of notice who's mistreating them. Eventually.
Yeah, it's a real interesting point. I don't think I really thought about that, but I can definitely see that as being a theme or something that you can glean from that.
Yeah, it was just obviously I was going into, given how much we talked about the commentary in the first two movies, I went into this not really because I've seen this one the least amount of times easily, and there's certainly nothing that I remembered being like, I always think of Dawn and I think of the commentary of the mall and consumerism. I think of Night, I think of Vietnam, and I think of the racial tension and all that stuff. When I thought of Day, before watching it again, I was like, I don't really remember thinking of something like that when I was watching it. So I was kind of looking at it through that eye like this time and seeing if there was something. I didn't even remember how this movie ended. I see. If you'd asked me before this rewatch, like how did the movie end, I couldn't have told you.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Well, and I'll just kind of go ahead and say I actually really like this movie a lot. I think it is very good.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry, Tim. Are you
it's
upset I didn't ask the question?
no, but I'm just making a point here, though. I'm saying is I like it a lot, but I do think that it is easily more forgettable than the other ones.
It is, yeah.
Like when I think of the other ones, I can imagine these very like classic, scenes that vividly pop out in my mind, and then when I think of this one, it's more like broad strokes that I think of, which it's still good. I still enjoy watching it, and yeah, I don't watch it as often as the other two, but.
Yeah, no.
I think you are right, though. It's not one that as easily comes to mind.
Yeah, I still think it's enjoyable. I do think it has some problems. Like, I do think the pacing's a little bit lopsided because the first half of the movie, like after the intro, there's an intro where they fly out to look for survivors in the city. There's a famous shot with the alligator, sort of, or crocodile. I can't tell the difference. I don't know which one's which.
I want to say gator, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've never seen one of either in person. I have no idea. But the and there's some fun gore and stuff, and it's like showing you that the society's crumbled this much, right? But after they go back down to the base, and it's sort of like, okay, I like this. I like the idea of having a home base, and I even like the idea of it being all set in the home base. Even though to a point it was to save money, because I don't know if you knew this, but the budget of this movie was halved, and the script was changed to match what the new budget was. Like originally there was going to be more action sequences and all sorts. But the first half of the movie, it does get a little bit repetitive because it's kind of constantly the same characters arguing about the same things for a long time. Like you have the military being sexist, making fun of the scientists, like, oh, we want results, we're in charge now, and it kind of goes in circles to a point. For up until about the halfway mark when different stuff starts to happen. But it's a long time without any
like real like gore kills or anything.
Well, yeah, sure, but yeah, I mean, arguably that's even a shallow thing. Like, I just mean, it doesn't have that, but it just doesn't have a sense of urgency. Like, there's no direction.
Okay.
Like, it's not driving to something for the first half, so it feels like it's kind of meandering a little bit. So
I feel like even the characters kind of don't really know exactly what they're aiming for or what they want to do.
Because they keep talking about Logan, like they call him Dr. Frankenstein because he's doing all the experiments. And they keep sort of talking about how they're not really even sure what he's trying to do, and that's one of the points of contention. And it's like, and I think that combined with the fact that I think the characters as well are probably the least interesting out of the three films.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, I mean, they're fine. Like, they're likable enough. Like, I mean, our main sort of trio, which is Sarah, John, who's the helicopter pilot, and then what's his name, McDermott, who's the guy with the goatee. And they kind of bond a little bit. There's a little bit of tension, but they kind of bond overall, and they kind of like have each other's backs, and they find that they have allies in each other as the movie goes on, and that's pretty cool because they're basically not the military, but they like even them. Like you compare them to the characters of the second movie or the first movie, and they're not as memorable. Like it's not as distinct, and I think that's I think what I'm boiling this down to here is that it's a pretty solid zombie movie. With some pacing issues, but it's a pretty solid zombie movie. But it feels like more of a typical movie, whereas the first two feel like these big game-changing, quite frankly, masterpieces. They feel like they really, really, really have something to say. Whereas this one, it feels like, oh, some of those themes are still there, and there's still some stuff that you can read into, sure. But the actual sort of the way it plays out feels a lot more typical. I don't want to call it generic. But it does kind of feel like a zombie movie that anyone could have made. I didn't really feel like this one had to be Romero.
Yeah, it's a little more, I don't know, maybe surface level, where it's like a kind of like a good like popcorn flick. Like, the other one, Night and Dawn, it just feels like it has that something extra that elevates it from just being like a good horror movie to, oh no, this is something special. This has depth, and I think there still is a little bit in this movie, but it's just not as, I guess, plentiful or
it's not devoid of it. It's because even as I understand that the reason why it was made is because, and who's to say that he didn't want to do a third one, because he ended up doing like more later on as well, eventually. But he made like a 3-picture deal with a studio, and they said, we'll give you this 3-picture deal. The only condition is that one of them has to be a zombie sequel. Because obviously Dawn did really well. And I wonder like how much of it was because, oh, I need to make one, not rather than because I have an idea and I really want to go into it. So there's that. There's also, and I guess some of the criticisms here kind of make sense in a weird way, because it's like, okay, the characters would be a bit more cynical. It would be less about surviving, the first two were, because we're further down the line. I mean, there's still survival elements, obviously, but they're not scrambling. They've got this base set up. It's more about, okay, we're jumping in. Where are these people? What's going on? And
yeah, I think it is kind of an interesting idea of just being like, well, what do we do now? But I don't know, maybe it might be more interesting as kind of like a conversation, that you have amongst your friends, as to actually watching it in a movie. It can be a little dull.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the big questions that's asked is John kind of critiques Sarah for like keeping records of things. It's sometimes it's mentioned at the start briefly, and then he brings it up, like, oh, you're keeping all these records and graphs. Who are you keeping them for? Like, we're kind of done here. We're at the end of our days. It also starts with the opening shot of well, it's actually her, but she's looking at a calendar, and we see this calendar. It's on October, and we see it kind of several times. And at the end of the movie, the final shot of the movie is actually her. She's when these three characters escape at the end in the helicopter, and they're on a beach somewhere. They're right to some island, like John wanted to go. He wanted to go to an island where they're away from the zombies. And she's like just made her own calendar, and she's like crossed off the next day. It's like the 4th of November. And I think one of the themes of the movie that is there is the idea of, well, should we still try and keep a resemblance of the civilization we had? And part of that is keeping the date. Like, if you're the only two people left on Earth, I'm not saying there's only these three people, but like, does it matter if we even know what date it is? Who cares? Kind of idea. I think for her it's important that she does know what date it is, and she does keep these things in line. And I think that's one of the themes that the movie wants to get at, and I don't know if it actually does it well. Like, it's a little bit there, but it ends in that shot. Like, the final shot of the movie's her deciding to keep track of what day it is and I don't know if the movie goes far enough to actually really hit that home, where I feel like it's actually pondering that question and like, okay, should humanity even bother? It's kind of relegated to that, and then the one conversation with John at his place underground.
Yeah, it feels like something that could be pretty easily missed, like if you're not like paying attention. Like, I don't know, maybe if he had wanted to do more with it, or something, because other than those like few instances, it's not like super ingrained in the movie or anything.
Now, let's tell some positives though, because there's positives to have here.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I just do want to say, going back to that opening shot, I actually really like it a lot. It might be a little cheap because it's kind of like a dream sequence, but like when she goes to the calendar and just like just tons and tons of hands bursting through the wall. I just think it looks really, really cool.
I'll tell you what I like about that, actually. I like that the opening actual shot is her sitting on the ground against the wall, and it's very reminiscent of the opening shot of Dawn, where that also had our female lead sitting against the wall, kind of half asleep. And from there, when she wakes up, when it ends the dream, it cuts to her in a helicopter, and again, it feels like they're deliberately having these like little imagery, the sort of links to the past film. It's like, okay, remember Dawn? We're kind of in that world again. It's just,
and that like ended with the characters leaving on a helicopter. This starts with other than that little dream sequence, starts with characters on a helicopter.
Yeah, so there's these little links, these little kind of surface level connections, just to sort of feel like we're part of the same world. It feels like it's part of the same series. This one definitely feels a bit more 80s though, which makes sense because it was 85 when it came out. The music's definitely a bit more 80s than the previous films.
Yeah. I really like the music in it though.
I like the music a lot as well, actually.
It's probably as you can guess, kind of 80s synth music, but I think it's really well and fits it good.
And obviously we have some really good, the gore. This is the one thing where it's better than the other two, is the gore, the makeup effects. The blood does not look shit this time, so that's a good plus. It also, anytime like a character's getting like ripped apart by zombies, it looks pretty great. There's one particular kill that I like with a shovel in the mouth.
Oh yeah,
takes the head off. I really like that shot.
I think if someone told me like the first half or so of this movie was a little slow or a little dull, I couldn't really disagree with them. Like I still find it enjoyable, but I think that could be an honest criticism. But I think, if you're a horror fan, a zombie fan, I think you definitely would like the last final act, because it's just so much carnage and people getting ripped apart, and it looks like so freaking good. Like
it really does.
getting like fingers under the eyelid and just like ripping it open and seeing like exposed eyeballs, and the ripping the head and with like the what do you call it, like the larynx or whatever being stretched and the voice going up as it does it. It's just like a really, really cool effect.
No, there's a lot of good stuff in that second half, which I think also actually adds to the complaint that the first half's really slow, because it feels really, once you get to that second half, it's like, oh, you've been keeping it all for this, like, spread the love out, man. I think, do you know I know I was on positives, but I do have to kind of dip back into a complaint here. Or at least it's just compared to the first two, which, I mean, feels a bit unfair because they're fantastic films, but even though this was low budget and, the budget was slashed in half, it was 3.5 million instead of 7 million. It's obviously much more than what the first one could. Like, Night was, super low budget. That was like micro budget levels almost. But the funny thing is, I actually think this one suffers from its low budget more than Night ever did. I think Night was, you never felt the budget in Night because everything felt like it was as good as it could have been. Whereas in this, I actually felt the budget constraint, mainly because that first half was them just standing around talking for, like, it felt like, okay, right, we've got X amount of money for, X amount of zombie kills and stuff. And, like, they put it all in the last half. Them standing around and not doing anything interesting for, like, the first half of the movie. But obviously after the opening scene in the city, which obviously they had this big blast thing at the start with all the zombies. But then once they go underground for a good 40 to 50 minutes, it is just them standing around talking, more or less. And I did kind of feel the budget constraints that it kind of felt like, okay, we can't really do anything that costs money, so we're going to have dialogue and that would be fine if it felt like it was moving forward, but because it wasn't, it felt a lot more stagnant. And I was kind of feeling even just in terms of directional style, this feels easily the least stylistic of the three.
I think that's pretty interesting because I didn't really feel that. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I think your points are valid. I don't know. I can't say that I was like super enthralled, but I really didn't find myself being that bored. I especially like any of this.
I wouldn't say I was bored because I think there's a lot of good ideas sprinkled throughout that 40-50 minutes of all the dialogue. I think it goes a long time without anything to really break it up.
Yeah,
and then
I do think like most of the stuff between the like our kind of heroes and then the military soldiers, that stuff I do think it's like a little repetitive. I do like though all the stuff with the scientists.
That's my main problem, is it feels repetitive. After a few scenes of it, it feels like, okay, we're just going in circles. And it's like, and it also, there's a couple of things about it that feel kind of weird. Like, there's a whole scene where, Rhodes, the captain, pulls a gun on Sarah, and like, if you don't sit down in that chair, I'm going to shoot you. And it's this big, tense scene where it feels like someone might get shot. And then in the very next scene, she says to like the other guy, like, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, nothing will happen, we'll just start cooperating. And it felt like she just dismissed that so easily. It's like, he's going nuts, he almost shot you. And it felt like it was just, really easily dismissed. I don't like him down too negative, because I do like the movie quite a bit. It's just, it's again, I mean, you're the third in a trilogy and the other two are like complete utter masterpieces. And the funny thing is I know there's some people, there's three types of people in this world, right? There's people who think Night is the best movie. There's people who think Dawn is the best movie, and they make up like 95% of people. But then you get this weird section of people, this weird 5% who think Day is the best movie. And I'm not going to take that away from them. You by all means, you knock yourselves out. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Because I think there's a completely valid argument for Night or Dawn. Like, if you want to swing one way or the other, you can fight that quite happily. We both landed on Dawn, but like, it's like, there's not like, I'm not going to argue if you think Night's better. They're both fantastic. Whereas Day, I think, is definitely a step down from those, maybe even a couple of steps down. So
Yeah, it's funny. I actually have a friend who likes this one the best.
what are we?
Yeah, I think it's a little weird, but it's not something that I would, chastise someone for, because it's not like, like some stuff you can just say like, come on, man, this is garbage. What are you talking about? Like, it is still a good movie. I definitely
yeah.
don't think it's as good as the other ones, but I don't know.
No, absolutely. But this is the thing. Like, I don't. Like I say, like my biggest comparison, honestly, between them, right? And I do think budget is a part of the reason for this, but it really is this idea that the first half of the movie feels like there's no urgency, and then stuff just sort of goes down really quickly, and all of a sudden we're in like a proper zombie movie, like just over halfway through, and whereas like I said, first movie night, like no money at all practically, right? There was nothing. But it still felt like there was always a sense of danger. There was always a sense of urgency, like, oh, there's a goal, we have to survive, we have to do this. And even though Dawn gets a little bit more comfortable because they clear out the mall and things are kind of peaceful for a little bit, like everything up until that point, it's like, okay, we're surviving. And it's like, oh no, we want to clear out this mall. Now we have a goal. Now we have something to accomplish, and it's like now we need to work towards that. And it always felt like we were heading towards something.
And I think the one of the really cool things about Dawn is it kind of has that wish fulfillment of being like, oh man, I wish I was trapped in a mall. Look at all the cool, fun stuff you can do, and like kind of thinking of all the different scenarios and whatnot. And this, it's kind of like,
it's a cave.
We're in a cave.
We're in a cave. Oh, it's so exciting. And like it makes sense, and I can even get that that's maybe part of the point is that no one really knows what to do now. Like maybe that's the theme of the movie, and we should like have that kind of feeling of like. The problem is though I think that on its own does not make for like a driving the plot forward and making it feel like stuff's happening. So that kind of, and I think the characters are a little bit more cartoony. I think as much as I like what they're doing with the whole like military, like sort of split between the military and the scientists and stuff, I do think like Rhodes is a little bit over the top and cartoony.
Oh yeah,
he's very. Right away he's like monologuing and he's like acting crazy and he's waving the gun around and it's just.
It feels pretty reminiscent of like an '80s villain.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah.
I guess in that sense, I just not only did I think the characters were more interesting than the other two, I felt they were more realistic, I guess, or at least more relatable and grounded. Whereas here it felt a little bit more, writing for the sake of what the message was. Which is funny because it has the weakest message of the three, which I think is really interesting. That I think that maybe tells you something, that if you have good characters, the message comes across much clearer and much stronger because of that. It's a knock-on effect.
And I don't know if you felt this too, but it seemed like there was a little bit of a message of like kind of like the military versus kind of like scientific endeavors. Like you have these scientists that are actually trying to like learn stuff, and then you have these soldiers that are, almost seem like they want to fight a war or something. And I don't know.
I do actually agree with this. I think it's not as specific as soldiers versus science, though. I think it's actually more a comment on ignorance and people who just don't trust scientists or just don't listen to them. Like think of anyone who just like doesn't want to believe global warming's a thing and they just shrug it off, like that kind of idea.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of thinking of. Like, I don't know if global warming was like a big topic back then, but that was kind of one of the first things that popped into my mind.
I think that thing obviously comes first for us because that's like a big thing right now, and it's a big thing that people who don't believe in it are just like, oh no, that's bullshit, like, right? And I think that's the one that comes to mind for us. But I think just that idea has always been there, even if it wasn't always global warming. Like it could, there was a
for the times.
There was a time when Darwin was seen as a nut job for all his crazy ideas. And, look where we are now. It's the idea that people who will shrug something off as being silly just because they don't understand it, and call the person saying it as saying they're crazy or whatever.
Yeah.
The weird thing in this movie though is that I actually do think Logan, Dr. Frankenstein,
is crazy.
Is kind of crazy, and what he's trying to do is kind of absurd. Like, it's this weird conflicting thing where, like, okay, the soldier guy is really crazy, but I kind of agree that we should just shoot them.
Yeah.
like I don't really see the point in trying to rehabilitate the zombies. Too many of, again, maybe there's a commentary there. There's a point to that. There's like, we should try and rehabilitate each other rather than. And okay, yeah, that works as a message, but these are still brain-eating zombies. I really, put them down. It doesn't make any sense in the plot. But yeah, it continues that idea, because in the last movie they were kind of like, they were drawn to places they recognised. In this one, he actually gets Bub to like hold a gun up, salute. He teaches him how to press play on the old Walkman.
I feel like a lot of other movies this would have come across as really cheesy, and I guess it's like a little cheesy here, but I don't mind it. I don't know if it's because I don't know, the person playing Bub really seems to, he's not half-assing it at all. He seems to really embody the character. And maybe because no one else really treats it as like kind of crazy or silly as it might seem, but I don't know, I kind of dig it, even though it's a little kind of weird to see a zombie shooting a gun and saluting.
I really have no problem with that, actually. None of my complaints with the movie have anything to do with how they handle Bub. I think it went too far in Land, like the idea of all the zombies getting smarter like starts to feel less like a zombie movie to me, and it's like, but the idea that you've got this one who you've isolated and you've kind of taught it these things, like that's a bit more interesting. But
I do want to say real quick, because I would say Land is kind of the other big zombie movie. Like Romero did a few after that, but I don't really count those that much. But it's been a long time since I've seen Land, and I remember liking it, but I don't know, it's been a while, and I'm actually excited to revisit it. I think it's coming to Blu-ray in October, and like a new like special editions. Even though I know it's not as beloved, I kind of want to check it out again because it's been a while for me.
I only saw Land once, and I remember being excited for it and then just being really disappointed and thought it was a weird movie. And I don't know, like maybe like the point is here is that he didn't want to just make traditional zombie movies anymore, so he started doing these weird things with them. And I'm not really sure if that holds. Like I say, I've not seen anything past Land. I've not seen Diary. I've not seen Survival of the Dead.
I think that's one thing you got to give credit to Romero for is he never really made the same movie twice. Like for better or worse, these movies all I feel are pretty distinctive from each other.
That is absolutely fair. I think maybe the problem is though is after 2, but certainly after 3, I think the ideas were starting to like not be there.
Yeah.
But here, I think this is a fine zombie movie with some pacing issues. It's nowhere near as good as the first 2, but if I'm going to critique it, it would be that I feel like this is a fine zombie movie that anyone could have made. I said that earlier, but that's kind of where I fall down. Where I'm like, I'm watching it and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like I really could have seen anyone making this. This didn't really feel like it had to. Like, Romero was necessarily behind it.
It almost seems like maybe more of a. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this was, Romero wrote the first draft of the script and then someone else, like, directed it or something. Like, it could almost feel like that.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, I think at the core, and I think you nailed it earlier on when you said, the last one was this wish fulfillment in a mall, and then this one's in a cave. I do genuinely think that the core idea is just not as fun as the last 2. I think that's maybe just the core issue is that, it's in a cave. It's not. I mean, I don't know what the idea was when he had more action, because and I remember from the documentary on the Blu-ray, I'm saying that he still had the same essence of the same movie. So I assume the stuff with Bob and all that was still there, but I wonder like how much of it was taking place outside of the bunker. Like, was there more stuff in the city? Was there more stuff? Like, cause part of me almost thinks like, because Night was in a house and then Dawn was in a shopping mall. I almost feel like next you have to go bigger. And maybe that was originally the idea. Maybe it was going to be a whole city. Maybe it was going to be this or that.
Something like more global. So like if they have like a helicopter and like military stuff, maybe, they're more, globetrotting a little bit.
I wouldn't have said globetrotting. I would have still thought it was still a core group of characters, but maybe this time they were trying to like get through a city, so there was a lot more out in the streets and going through different buildings and things like that.
Yeah.
Or, but again, that's just one. I'm not saying like I've got the definitive what should have been the third Dead movie. Just it felt like instead of like having that natural progression again, and some of it feels natural. Don't get me wrong, because it's like later in the timeline and some of what they're going through. I don't know. There's just an element to it that's kind of like just disappointing after the last 2. Even if it's still a very solid, well-made movie. Like we say, the gore's really good. The characters aren't as good as the first two, but they're still pretty solid. Like I like both the pilot and what's his face, McDermott. Like they're both kind of fun. The pilot's got a couple of lines that I really like actually. One of which is definitely at the start when they're getting out of the helicopter and he's like, right, well I'm going to keep the engine running. If you're not back, if something goes down and you're not back, you're likely to have a very bad afternoon. Was the line, but it was even funnier because he's got like a thick Jamaican accent, and it's a really funny line.
And this one, probably the only one that has like an actual like happy ending. Like Night has a pretty depressing ending. Dawn has like a hopeful but like a little bit ambiguous ending. Yeah. This one actually seems like, oh, okay, the characters actually get a nice little break.
But the funny thing is though, is that this is the one that feels the most out of place.
Yeah.
Because it does that weird dream thing again where you think that we're seeing the scene of them getting to the helicopter and she gets grabbed, but then she wakes up and it's like, oh no, they already got in the helicopter. This is like kind of like, that was like a version of what happened, but it actually did happen and they got here. And they're on a beach and we see the other two guys like, fishing and like one's like sitting on the, on the beach, the other one's fishing, and I'm like, this feels too like sweet of an ending. It's too saccharine sweet. I don't know.
I was okay with it. It didn't really bother me.
Not that I wanted them to die or have like some dark ending necessarily. It felt too. It felt like too much of an easy, quick wrap up as opposed to like a proper like ending. It was almost like he just didn't know how to end it in a fun way. So it's just like, the way that it just works.
Yeah, I wonder if he actually did like. If there was a little thought of like, maybe I should give my characters a break for once, or kind of put like a nice little bow on it instead of being like, all right, I definitely don't want you to feel like these people are in danger or anything at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you could argue because they did have their issues and they kind of worked them out and they eventually saw eye to eye. It was like the people who do eventually cooperate are the ones who might survive, and then the ones who refuse to listen or learn anything are the ones that are doomed. And that's the military characters, and even to an extent the Frankenstein character, because he didn't really listen to anyone either. He was just so convinced and dedicated to his one belief that he could do this, and he didn't really accept anyone else's opinion or explanation for anything.
Something real quick I wanted to ask you, see if you got the same feeling I did, but towards the end when they're like escaping and they're going up that ladder. I felt like I was like, man, this looks like such a Resident Evil shot to me.
I can see it. I
don't know. I feel like I feel like that happens with me with like every zombie movie, though. Like, there's always like some point where I'm like, that reminds me of playing Resident Evil.
You're bound to encounter them a few times as you're going through. Because we had one in the first movie with the arms coming through the planks of wood on the window.
And I'm sure the people that made the games that have probably said that they've been fans.
The second one kind of had a save room.
Oh yeah,
can I see that? Yeah, and this one had the ladder. Yeah, all coming together. Yeah, in fact, hell, in Resident Evil, you typically leave with a helicopter at the end. At least in the first.
True.
Well, the first and the third game end that way. Code Veronica ends with a fighter jet. You get an upgrade.
It's been forever since I played that.
Get an upgrade. Yeah, Chris and Claire ride off into the sunset in a fighter jet. That's how you end your zombie game. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else worth going through. I mean, obviously you have the Steel character, who's the sort of the outside of the captain. He's the really cocky one who. Whereas the captain's kind of crazy, like, and power hungry. Steel is kind of the immature guy who's constantly just goading everyone else and thinking it's funny to like threaten them and all that kind of stuff, and just he's kind of that character.
The loud voice, like the captain Rhodes, like he feels like he's very intimidating. He's like oh man, you gotta watch out before this guy snaps. And then Steel's kind of like almost a little bit like a comic relief, kind of like the very loud, boisterous kind of guy.
Well, he's comic relief to them. He's not really comic relief to us because he's kind of annoying to us.
I mean, I think if there's anything in the movie that's going to be close to the comic relief, I don't know. I can see like people laughing at some of his lines as so like they're not funny, but they that kind of like loud dumb guy kind of thing.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think my pacing problem would have probably a little fewer repetition, a little bit, and I think maybe one scene or one reason in the first half of the movie to go outside again and do something outside. Like maybe they had to go get something, or I don't know. Like I think that to break up the monotony of them just standing around like debating the same things would have maybe split things up a little bit, and that maybe helped that issue. I mean, I'd still have the opinion it was the weakest of the three, and I'd still have the opinion that it wasn't as interesting as the other two, but I think that particular issue could have been saved by just one or two things like that. Now, admittedly, adding in a whole extra set of scenes where they leave and do something, that becomes quite expensive. So I understand why it's not there, but like I say, that's where I kind of felt the budget kind of creeping in. It's like, okay, well, we've got this one set. let's use the shit out of it. That's kind of Day of the Dead. Like I do genuinely feel like there's some interesting ideas in here. I like it overall because I do like I like sort of bunker bottled stories. You know me, Tim. I like a bottle movie when they're all in one location. But like I say, this one I feel like it didn't have the drive for a lot of it. And you could tie that to just the plot, or you could tie that to the characters not being as interesting. But either way, it suffers a little bit because of that. Certainly not bad though. It's got some fun stuff. Good gore. It's still overall quite enjoyable with the plot. The zombie stuff with Bob is fun. And like I say, the last like 30 minutes is pretty rip roaring as everything's going down. All right.
Here.
Do you want to rate things then, Tim?
Let's do it. Yeah. I'm gonna give it a pretty solid score. I think I'm gonna give it like a solid 8. Yeah, mostly because looking back on it, like I really really like that last half, and yeah, I mean, like we said, there are problems and stuff, but I think all the stuff I like definitely outweighs the problems that I have. So it's still really solid. Yeah, not as good as the other ones, like the Dawn we gave a perfect score to, and Night is just like a shade below perfect for me. So it's still a good score, but yeah, no, that's.
I'm gonna go a nudge low. I'm gonna say a 7. I'm gonna give Day a 7 out of 10. And I think it actually did go down a little bit on this rewatch because I hadn't seen it as much. And I think from memory I was thinking an 8, but once I watched it again, I was like, no, I think I'm going to nudge it down a little bit. I feel like certainly once you've seen it a couple of times, that opening chunk of the movie is a little bit rougher to get through. So 7 out of 10 for me. So before we go, we do actually get to announce a couple of things because we have the result of the vote, the Patreon vote. The patrons get to vote on one episode a month for the following month. So over July, there was a vote with 4 Vincent Price films to see which one would get an episode this month in August. And the winner of that was The Fall of the House of the Usher. So you can expect that coming in the next couple of weeks sometime. The vote this month for next month that patrons can vote on is a Stephen King theme. Because, of course, by the time we get around to doing whatever wins, it'll be close to It coming out. So we thought, we'll do a Stephen King movie to relate it to that. So the options are Silver Bullet, Christine, 1408, and I don't have it in front of me. I've forgotten the fourth one. You're absolutely...
Sleepwalkers? Is that what
Sleepwalkers. It was Sleepwalkers. You're right. Okay. Sleepwalkers is the fourth one. Oh, very good. Right, there you go. That's the 4 options. So patrons can vote on that. They have till the end of the month. All the way up to the 31st of August. I have to think about how many days we're in August there for a second. So by all means, go and vote on that and decide our fate as to what we're going to be watching later in the month. But so some cool stuff. But other than that, guys, obviously go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, check all that stuff out. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates, like, subscribe, all that jazz. But that is us. So thank you very much once again for watching, and we will see you next time.